Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Israel elaborately planned for the opening of the United States Embassy in Jerusalem and invited 86 countries to be part of the inauguration. US President Donald Trump hailed it as a big day for Israel and touted the embassy as a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people. India was also an invitee to the opening ceremony but chose to stay away. India has had a muted response to Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, prompting countries to ask New Delhi to clarify its stand. India was one of the earliest and vocal champions of the Palestinian cause during the days it was leading the non-aligned movement, while it quietly pursued ties with Israel. However, India's ties with Israel have gotten more robust since Prime Minister Narendra Modi took charge. Under Modi, New Delhi has moved to a more open relationship with Israel, lifting the curtain on thriving military ties and also homeland security cooperation. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze India's West Asia dilemma. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, Pramit Choudhary, foreign editor of the Hindustan Times, and Professor Sunil K. Choudhary, Director, Developing Countries Research Center. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you. India was invited to be a part of the opening ceremony of the US Embassy in Jerusalem, but we decided to stay out of it. Was that the right way to go forward?
Absolutely. I think this is also following what our response was immediately after President Trump announced on the 6th of December 2017, last year, that the US Embassy will be moving from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And we have not supported this move. In fact, if you recall, when the issue came up for discussion in the United Nations at the UNGA on the 21st of December, that India was one of the 128 countries with an overwhelming majority. These countries spoke out against the decision of the United States to move the embassy. So that was exactly what we followed through when the actual movement of the embassy took place on the 14th of May. That is the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the Jewish nation, so to say. So we have been following. We have such a huge interest as far as the region is concerned, as far as Middle East or West Asia is concerned, in terms of our diaspora, the number of people, about 8 million people are there, and their safety, security is of paramount importance. So we, of course, have to have good relations with the countries in the Arab world, Gulf Cooperation Council, also with Iran and with the others. Our energy requirements, we are importing about 80–85% of our requirements in oil and gas from that region. Remittances, out of the about $70 billion, we are getting more than about $40 billion from there. That is more than 50% of our remittances. Then in terms of investments that have been coming in, trade also between India and that region. So that region is very, very important as far as we are concerned.
Sure.
Of course, notwithstanding our relations with Israel, as you said yourself, Frank, they have been growing, they have been expanding, and we had opposed this move of the embassy in December and voted against this again on the 21st of December, just less than a month before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was to come here. And when he was asked, he said, you know, one negative vote by India would not destabilize the rapidly expanding and growing partnership between the two countries.
Sure. That having been said, Pramit Choudhary, is it a difficult balancing act as far as Israel and Palestine are concerned for India?
Increasingly, no, because the relationship with, what has happened now is Prime Minister Modi has visited Israel, has not visited Palestine at the same time. He's made a separate trip. As you know, he went to the UAE and then went to Palestine. And what he has basically signified, and this is very clear when you talk to the Indian Foreign Ministry, we now have two separate policies. We no longer attempt to hyphenate Israel and Palestine together. We have an Israel relationship, we have a Palestine policy, and we have a Palestine relationship because we recognize Palestine. So
will they not overlap at some point in time?
Not really. As Ambassador said, there are elements of Israel's policy regarding Palestine we will not support. We already recognize Palestine as a country. and we have an embassy, we have a Palestinian embassy in Delhi, which most Western countries don't have yet, not even the Europeans. Very few, in fact, I think none of the Europeans have recognized Palestine yet. So we're very much further along the path as far as that is concerned. So the Israel relationship is basically no longer hostage to what happens between Israel and Palestine, but neither is the Palestinian policy dependent. We will do what we want in Palestine, and we don't really care what Israel has to say about it. And Israel accepts this, and so far have the Palestinians.
Sure.
The one thing that to keep in mind, though, is the Palestinian cause is now no longer one cause. It is very clearly two. We do not support Hamas. No there are no Indian interaction with Hamas because they represent the Muslim Brotherhood, which the Indian government remains very hostile to. We support the secular Palestinian nationalism represented by the Palestinian Authority. But Hamas we have no interactions with, and we do not provide any even aid, which we do to the other Palestinian Authority, to Hamas.
Sure, sure. Professor, after all that's been said so far, how important is it for India to have a peaceful region, and what's at stake for us in that particular region?
I would say that we are basically moving in an era of de-hyphenation when we discuss India's relations with Israel, but not countering relations with Palestinians. So our stance with Israel and our relations with Israel have been growing, but it has not exactly deviated from our principal stand on Palestinians. Basically, we have always advocated a peaceful solution of the problem, where our focus is basically two-state solution, but that has to be ensured peacefully and through democratic practices, as Mr. Choudhary has rightly stated, because our support is to ensure a two-state solution through democratic, peaceful means. We have actually stood by that. And secondly, India for past few years has actually tried to moderate the stand of the NAM against Israel. So basically, we supported Israel on many important issues and many instances in UN declarations and UN negotiations. Secondly, I would say that it's an era that India is now moving not beyond pragmatism. It's would say in international relations it's a neorealism, where the focus is besides state actors, it's non-state actors, and we've started moving beyond power relations in terms of security concerns. So our relations with Arab world on the one hand and with Israel on the other, we're just trying to make a balancing between these two important strands.
And it helps us also that Israel and the Arab world seem to be coming closer together as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we can see, and we can basically find out a new role for India, because India has got a very good legitimate acceptance both in the Arab world and with the Israeli and all those nations supporting Israel on this important issue.
Okay, a couple of things. Let's talk first about the two-state solution. Ambassador, with the US opening up an embassy in Jerusalem, with the US accepting Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, what happens now to the two-state solution? And also we've seen several South American countries jump to this idea and want to open embassies in Jerusalem as well.
I think by this move of the United States, the two-state solution has gone that much further and will be that much more difficult to achieve. Because, you know, here when we are talking about the move of the capital to Jerusalem, it's not only West Jerusalem, it's the whole of Jerusalem. And if we look at what has been the US policy, the US stated policy in terms of the decisions by the US Congress, for the last so many decades they have been saying that the embassy should move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Even if you look at the last few presidents, starting with Clinton to George W. Bush to even Barack Obama, who also said that the capital should, our embassy should move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and it should stay as an undivided Jerusalem. None of these presidents had what it took to take that decision, although in terms of principle, it was always there as far as the United States is concerned. Mr. Trump has taken it primarily, principally for domestic political reasons, and but as far as promoting security and stability and peace in that region, I think he has been able to push it that much further, because now if East Jerusalem is the place where Palestine has always laid its claim to be its own capital, but Israel has never recognized it. And now with the United States having taken this very provocative and controversial step. And the other countries, as you said, who are sort of, they have been waiting in the wings, but maybe they did not want to bear that heavy political cost of being the first to move. So we had Guatemala coming in on Wednesday. We might have Paraguay, we might have Honduras, we might have Czech Republic, we might have some of the other European countries also, a few of them, who might sort of, recognize this. I do not see that this is going to sort of, turn into a much larger number of countries. I think the major countries, whether it is in Europe or Russia, China, India, etc., they will desist from recognizing Jerusalem as the capital. But Israel has been reaching out to smaller countries in South America as also in Africa. If you see the voting that took place on the 21st of December, there were 13 countries that voted for the resolution supporting President Trump's move of the embassy, and most of them are basically from South America, the smaller countries.
Sure.
So going forward, we can see some of the other countries, and that in itself will mean that the whole of Jerusalem, if they have no such such caveat that it is only the West Jerusalem, because I think also we need to recognize, Frank, that most of the Israeli offices, whether it is the Foreign Office, it is the Parliament, it is the Prime Minister's office, they are all based in Jerusalem.
Sure.
But they are in West Jerusalem. So that is where everyone is doing business. That's about 1 hour away.
Right.
They are doing business substantively de facto, but de jure, it has not been declared as the capital, which this move of the embassy has taken it further.
Sure. Pramit, why are the South American countries rushing to open up embassies in Jerusalem? What's at stake for them?
I think it's just a question of trying to be friendly to the United States. They have you'll notice some African countries, Latin America, odd countries in Eastern Europe. These are countries that actually have, the Palestinian cause means nothing. I mean, let's understand that large swaths of the world, the Palestinians are irrelevant, and they don't care about who they are, what they are, any more than there are parts of the world where the Tibetan cause or the Uyghur cause or the Hmongs or various other repressed groups around the world matter. Rohingyas. And so these are countries where there is no domestic political cost for them. The relationship with winning, scoring points with the Americans is more important. And it's also important to realize that Israel has had a very strong diplomatic outreach over the past 5 or 6 years. If you look at where Netanyahu, he's been visiting Africa. He's visited, I think, about 6 or 7 African countries. He's gone to Africa, I think, 3 times in the past 5 years. He's also visited Latin America. So that Israel has actually been able to expand its diplomatic outreach at a time, as you correctly mentioned, a lot of the Arabs no longer care for the Palestinian cause. So therefore the cost...
Doesn't the same thing apply to India as well then?
In the sense that we already have a strong relationship with Israel, though.
No. Not in that sense. Not acknowledging an embassy.
We would have no cost, but we do have there is a domestic political cost. The Palestinian cause is something that is still considered important to lots of people in India. Second, why would we change our Palestinian policy? It's not a good sign for a country to go back and forth on its overall policy. And third, we support the concept of a peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. The problem with the American move ultimately is that it does not combine, you do something like that as part of a larger package designed to move the region towards a diplomatic solution. Trump has no peace process. He talks a lot about a peace process. He's not doing anything. And in effect, what America has really done by saying that we'll move to, why did America, as Ambassador Sajjanhar said, it has been a long-standing American policy that their embassy should move, but they never moved it. Why? Because they knew that the day you do that, you surrender your ability to be an honest broker between Israel and Palestine. And even the Palestinians accepted that America was the only country in the world that could be the broker of a peace process, whether it was the Camp David or Oslo and so on.
Is that responsibility?
And Trump is effectively saying, I don't care for a peace process.
Okay.
America doesn't have to play this role anymore. And if we don't have to play this role, then who is America's friend? It's Israel. Palestine means nothing to the United States.
Right. Yes, Ambassador, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think basically what Pramit has said after that, it really takes care of that. But just one, 2 points. That is, in terms of Netanyahu's outreach to Latin America and to Africa, it is both aid as well as military sales. So both of them, these have acted. And of course, they want to be on the right side of the United States for the trade and aid status with the United States. Also, we have to see that the Arab world is divided down the middle as far as relations with Israel are concerned. You would see that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, he sort of, when he went to the United States, he said that the Palestinians should just take whatever is offered to them and start talking, start negotiation.
And be happy with it.
And be happy with it. And this stop whining. And they should shut up. That's what he said. And he said that Israel has a right to exist. So I think as far as that region is concerned, Iran has appeared as a much bigger threat for a large number of countries there as compared to Israel. So whether you see Saudis or you see UAE or you see Bahrain, these are countries which are mellowing their, improving the relations, mellowing their opposition to Israel because of the expanding, looming Iranian threat.
Fair enough. With all that's happening in the region, Professor, who's going to take up the Palestinian cause? Because we've seen as an immediate aftermath of Trump opening the embassy in Jerusalem, there were riots, there was violence, several people were killed. Is India going to lead the Palestinian cause?
I think the American stand basically, as Ambassador has rightly stated, it has been part of the congressional policies and resolutions that Trump has actually succeeded in executing that important decision of the Congress as far as opening of the embassy in Jerusalem and keeping Jerusalem as the capital, united capital of Israel. But I believe as far as Indian stand is concerned, because India has been rightly championing the cause of making a democratic solution to the problem and its recognition, because American initiative could be seen in terms of the recognition of Israel would lead to further negotiations which may unfold the different apertures of solution to this problem. India can play a very important role, and India can be seen as an international interlocutor in terms of having acceptance in the Arab world, and it has been accepted in these negotiations with the Palestinians as well. Because the only problem with the only worries with India is that it has always advocated the democratic path to reach that solution, and rather than focusing on Fatah, this lead which has been taken by the Hamas with different reasons altogether may not be acceptable to the international community. So India can make a very important role while bringing these democratic forces on a common platform, and Arab world, even India's acceptance in the European world could be seen as a new role where India can bring about a peaceful solution to this problem. And as far as this democratic strength is concerned, I believe that democratic strength would be the most important strength to reach out all those partners which may see in terms of a rightful solution to this problem of Arabs and the Palestinians.
Sure. Ambassador, do you see India playing the role of an honest broker, something that Pramit was referring to in his previous comment? And because the Palestinians seem to have reached out to India, the Palestinian ambassador to India in fact said that India should play a bigger role, India should sit at the table and try and sort out the problems of the Israelis and Palestinians.
I don't think that India, we have great interest in that region, and we want stability, we want security, we want peace for our energy security, for our people who are there. So that, of course, our interest cannot be denied. But I do not, and of course, India is one of the few countries, major countries, big countries, who have good relations with all countries across the table. We have spoken about it, whether it is Israel or Saudi Arabia or UAE, or our Prime Minister has gone to Iran, to Qatar, to all these countries. And so we have excellent relations. But what I would say is that specifically only to the issue of Palestine, because there are other problems, problem areas in that region. Syria is one, Yemen is another, and there are so many others. But coming specifically to this one, the Arab world also speaks about this a great deal. For instance, the Arab summit that took place on the 15th of last month. There they made it the Quds summit, the Jerusalem summit, and all of them got together, the 22 members, to denounce this move by the United States. But they are not really willing to do anything much on the ground. For instance, following the 6th December announcement by President Trump, what happened as far as the Arab world is concerned? Was there an explosion? Was there any great opposition? There were 4 people who were killed. There were peaceful marches in Lebanon, Turkey, etc., etc. And then it all died down. I agree, the point that you had made, that more than 60 people were killed on Monday across the Gaza border. And that, of course, needs to be condemned in no uncertain terms, as the United Nations did on Tuesday in its special meeting. But otherwise, I think in terms of focusing on it in words, in condemning what the United States is doing, I think the Arab world is not really doing anything substantive or concrete in moving towards a two-nation solution, democratic solution to this problem, because they also feel that they have other more important issues that they have to deal with.
That brings me to the question that I was asking earlier. Who's going to take up the Palestinian cause then, and who can the Palestinians trust?
Yeah, I think that is something that will have to come in future. I was also looking at it, who could be the honest broker. I fully agree with Pramit that United States has lost all credibility, if it did have any credibility earlier, because now it is seen to be completely siding with the Israelis, with Israel, with one of the actors in this play. So they have lost all credibility. We have to see in future who will be the other honest broker or interlocutor who might emerge. I think because of not only what is at stake out there, also because of what our domestic compulsions are and domestic considerations are, we should stay in contact, in active touch with all the players, whether it is the Arab world with whom we have good relations, with Israel, with the United States, with the other major players, Russia, China. We should not be acting individually, but maybe as a concert of nations, of interested parties which have significant interest in that region to bring peace and security and try to find ways to take it forward.
Let's talk about the other significant player in the region. That, of course, is Iran. We haven't focused much on Iran thus far. Going forward, Pramit, what's the way forward really? How do we deal with the situation in West Asia, and what should be our best focus area and what should be our best foot forward?
Well, since Modi's come to power, there have been 2 speeches made by the Foreign Ministry on India's West Asia policy. Both of them have said the same thing, that India does not have a West Asia policy. We have a set of separate bilateral relations which are important to us. The number 1 relationship is actually now the United Arab Emirates, which has now emerged as possibly one of our most biggest global partners in terms of its investments and interests in India. Israel is, of course, a very close second, though on a very different platform. And Iran is there. And then we have now new relationships. We haven't always had a traditional one with Oman, for example. We now have a budding relationship with Saudi Arabia, which may develop, and a little bit now with Jordan and Egypt. The Turkish relationship is now effectively back in cold storage. And Syria and Iraq are too dysfunctional right now for us to do anything. But we don't attempt, and it's very clear, we don't try to be part of a solution for the Middle East, because we think the Indian government is very clear that this is simply beyond our capacity to do. And since the present fault line is no longer, the dominant fault line in the Middle East is no longer Israel versus Palestine. That is now dropped to, priority number 6 or 7. The dominant fault line, as has been mentioned, is now between Persian Shias and Sunni Arabs. In other words, between Iran and the Sunni Emirati on the southern part of the Gulf. And I would throw in Egypt and into that game as well. Now, this divide between Shia and Sunni, or between Arab and Persian, is something India does not want to get involved in, simply put, because we are the world's third largest Sunni and the world's third largest Shia population.
So best stay out of it.
Best stay out of it, and we have no solution.
Right.
And so all that we have done, we have an economic relation. Our economic relationship is overwhelmingly with the Sunni Arabs. We have almost no diaspora in Iran. We do get oil from Iran, but oil, frankly, can be gotten from anywhere in the world. There's so much surplus right now. What you're really looking there for is to maintain a relationship. On the other hand, civilizationally and culturally, in many ways, we're much closer to the Iranians than we are to the Sunni Arabs. So the Indian government's response is basically stay out of this for the time being and try to just maintain these important bilateral relations, but trying to not let them become hyphenated.
Sure. Something that we have a lot of experience with, something that
Yes.
we've always done right from the beginning since
Yeah.
we got independence. Professor, close the show for us with a concluding remark on the way forward.
I think India must continue to follow a very important role in terms of expanding its ties with Israel strategically in terms of bilateral relations, which Mr. Choudhary has rightly stated, not with Israel but also with other countries of the Arab world. And secondly, extending its supports to the cause of Palestinians in terms of democratic, peaceful solution, two-state solution. And thirdly, emerging as or energizing its role as an important interlocutor to come as a solution to the problem, because India is again a country which has got legitimate acceptance all across the Arab world and the democratic world. So India can play a very important role to go for a solution to this problem as far as Palestinians and the Israelis are concerned.
Okay, all right then. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of India as well. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. You can share your feedback and suggestions with us as well. The email ID is indiaaswell.feedback@gmail.com. And you can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.